romantic inclination there ever? Off screen?
Barbara Hale never wanted to be famous, not even close. While other girls were dreaming of Hollywood lights and movie premieres, Barbara was sketching still lifes in a quiet Illinois art classroom, focused on becoming a commercial artist. That's right. Before she ever stepped in front of a camera, she had charcoal under her fingernails and paint in her hair. Born in a small town in 1922, she was the daughter of a gardener and a homemaker. Nothing about her life screamed celebrity. She wasn't chasing stardom. She was chasing simplicity, structure, and a career where her work spoke louder than her face ever would. But fate, it had other plans. One day, while walking through the streets of Chicago, everything changed. A man in a suit from a modeling agency stopped her. "Have you ever considered modeling?" he asked. Barbara laughed at first, but curiosity whispered louder than doubt. Within months, her face was on magazine covers. Within a year, she was the face scouts were fighting over. But here's where the plot twists. Barbara didn't crave the attention. Not really. She was pulled into the spotlight almost against her will, because the world couldn't look away. There was something about her presence, something calm, mysterious, and quietly powerful. And Hollywood, it didn't just notice, it pounced. When RKO Pictures signed Barbara Hale, they didn't just hand her a contract. They handed her a one-way ticket into the Hollywood machine, a glittering world known for chewing up wide-eyed newcomers and spitting them out as gossip headlines. At first, she played along. They gave her soft comedies, romantic dramas, westerns, roles that fit the good girl image. But behind those soulful eyes and soft smiles, Barbara was watching, learning. She wasn't naive. She saw the trap behind the glamour. Her beauty made her bankable, but her talent made her unstoppable. By the late 1940s, she was starring opposite James Stewart, Rock Hudson, Robert Mitchum, names that carried weight, money, and secrets. But here's the kicker. Barbara outshined them without ever trying. She didn't chase the spotlight. It followed her, and people started asking questions. Who is this woman who commands the screen without shouting? Why does every director want her, even though she avoids the parties, the scandals, the press? What they didn't know was that Barbara had mastered the most powerful thing an actress in 1950s Hollywood could have: mystery. And mystery that was magnetic, but the whispers started anyway. She's too good to be just an actress. Who's protecting her career? And more dangerously, right? Who is she sleeping with? This was Hollywood, where success always came with suspicion. But Barbara didn't flinch. She kept working, kept rising. And when Perry Mason came calling, she didn't just say yes. She rewrote what it meant to be a woman on television. Television was exploding. America was glued to their screens. Courtroom dramas were rising, but none like this. CBS was launching Perry Mason, a legal thriller starring the intense, brooding Raymond Burr. But something was missing. The lead needed a counterbalance. Someone sharp, composed, quietly brilliant. They didn't need a pretty assistant. They needed someone who could steal a scene without speaking a word. Enter Barbara Hale. The moment she stepped into the role of Della Street, something shifted. She wasn't just the secretary, she was the soul of the show. Calm under pressure, smarter than most of the lawyers in the room. The one person who could challenge Perry Mason with just a look. The chemistry between Barbara Hale and Raymond Burr. Electric. Viewers saw it instantly. The tension, the trust, the quiet moments loaded with unspoken words, and off camera, that chemistry didn't fade. Tabloids exploded with questions. Are they dating? Are they living together? But Barbara and Raymond said nothing. The silence only made the rumors louder. Behind the scenes, the pressure was suffocating. Over 270 episodes across 9 intense seasons. Hale was filming nonstop, managing rising fame and dodging gossip like landmines. But she never cracked. She won an Emmy in 1959, and instead of celebrating like most stars, partying, drinking, making the rounds, Barbara thanked the crew and quietly went home to her family. She didn't want fame. She wanted respect, and that made her rare and dangerous. While the tabloids were busy pairing her with Raymond Burr, Barbara's heart was already taken, and no one saw it coming. Flashback to 1945. Barbara's filming a dusty western called West of the Pecos. It's not a blockbuster, just another paycheck, until he walks on set. Bill Williams, former soldier, rugged, charming, Hollywood's new leading man. He wasn't slick or overly polished. He had something else, realness, in a city built on fakery that made him dangerous. They met between takes, shared coffee, laughed. It wasn't love at first sight, it was deeper, slow, quiet, and real. A year later, in 1946, they were married. No paparazzi, no spectacle, just two actors trying to build something that most people in Hollywood couldn't understand, a normal life. And somehow, they made it work. While others were divorcing faster than they were marrying, Barbara and Bill stayed strong for nearly 50 years. 3 kids, quiet holidays, privacy, stability. But here's where the story gets twisted. Barbara was rising, fast. Her face was on every screen in America. And behind the scenes, producers were telling her, drop the husband. You'll be more marketable as a single woman. She didn't flinch. She didn't bend. Instead, she protected her family like a lioness. Even as Perry Mason exploded, Barbara shielded her children from fame, protected her marriage from headlines, and kept Hollywood at arm's length. And the craziest part? It worked. Bill supported her, she supported him, and their son, William Catt, grew up to follow in their footsteps, eventually acting alongside his mother in the Perry Mason movies of the 1980s and 90s. The Hale-Williams marriage was the one thing Hollywood couldn't corrupt, but not everything in Barbara's life stayed so protected. For nearly a decade, Perry Mason ruled American television, and so did its stars. Raymond Burr, the courtroom powerhouse, Barbara Hale, the unshakable Della Street. Together they were magic, but behind the scenes, that magic was dangerous. Fans couldn't stop watching them. The way they looked at each other, the way they moved around one another like planets orbiting the same sun. Whispers turned into questions. Are they in love? Are they hiding something? Why don't they just admit it? Barbara always smiled politely and changed the subject. Raymond Burr, even more silent. And that silence, it only fueled the fire. But decades later, after Raymond passed away, and long after the cameras had stopped rolling, Barbara Hale finally spoke. In a rare interview near the end of her life, her voice trembled as she said the words fans had waited to hear for over 40 years. Raymond was more than my co-star. He was my protector, my friend, the kindest soul I ever knew. She didn't confirm the romance, but she didn't deny the intimacy. What she revealed instead was even more powerful. Raymond Burr had carried a painful secret, one that Hollywood whispered about but never fully understood. He lived with walls up, high, strong, and impenetrable. A deeply private man, guarding a personal life he never allowed the public to see. Barbara was one of the few people who got past those walls. They shared long conversations off camera, laughter no one else heard, and silences so profound they didn't need to be filled. When Raymond died in 1993, Barbara said it felt like losing a part of herself. Not a castmate, not a work partner. He was my Perry, she said, voice cracking, and I'll always be his Della. She never needed to explain more, because the bond they had, it was something deeper than the public ever could have guessed, and far more sacred than any headline ever captured. While Barbara Hale was dominating film and TV, she was also doing something that didn't make the headlines: radio. Not for fame, not for money, but for something more personal and more patriotic. You see, Barbara believed in service, not just to the camera, but to her country. In the late 1940s and early 50s, she quietly lent her voice to radio dramas with real meaning. She starred in Voice of the Army, a public morale series created after World War II to honor soldiers and bring stories of courage into American homes. She didn't promote it. She didn't pose for press. She just showed up, script in hand, voice ready. Then came Lux Radio Theater, the crown jewel of radio storytelling. Only the best actors were invited. Barbara was cast without hesitation. Her voice, warm, powerful, and full of emotional texture, captivated audiences even without her signature look on screen. But she didn't stop there. She joined episodes of Family Theater, a Catholic-leaning program that focused on moral stories, family values, and spiritual themes. It wasn't trendy, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Hollywood, and that's exactly why Barbara did it. She wasn't just an actress, she was a believer in stories that uplift, in values that matter, and in using fame without letting it use you. Barbara Hale was a Hollywood icon, but ask her what her proudest role was, she'd say, Mother, every time. While she was filming hundreds of episodes, dodging gossip and shaping television history, she was also raising 3 children in the eye of the storm. 2 daughters, Jody and Juanita, and a son who would one day become a star in his own right, William Catt. That name might sound familiar. He was the lead in The Greatest American Hero, the curly-haired, unlikely superhero that viewers instantly loved. He also played Paul Drake Jr. in the Perry Mason TV movies, acting alongside his real-life mother. But behind the screen, Barbara never let fame interfere with family. Hollywood offered her everything: parties, headlines, endorsements, distractions. She turned it all down. Instead, she packed lunches, went to school plays, protected her kids from the chaos she saw swallow so many other families. And when her husband, Bill Williams, died in 1992, after nearly 50 years of marriage, Barbara didn't spiral. She didn't retreat. She stood tall, because now she had a second legacy to protect, his and the one they'd built together. She once said that acting gave her a platform, but family gave her purpose. And maybe that's why, unlike so many of her peers, she never burned out. She stayed grounded, warm, and real, even when the cameras turned off. Barbara Hale passed away on January 26, 2017, in her longtime home in Sherman Oaks, California. She was 94. The cause? COPD, a slow, suffocating condition that eventually robbed her of her breath, but never her dignity. She faced the illness quietly, surrounded by family, refusing to let it define her final years. At the time of her death, she held a haunting title: the last surviving original cast member of Perry Mason. With her passing, an entire era of television, black and white courtrooms, smoky drama, and one woman's quiet strength officially came to an end. But here's what the tabloids didn't print. In her final years, Barbara Hale never chased recognition. She didn't care for awards or red carpet retrospectives. She was content with her garden, her memories, and the love of the people who truly knew her. And when tributes poured in, from fellow actors, fans, and TV historians, one message kept repeating: she was class. From the first moment to the very last, Barbara didn't just act in the golden age of television, she embodied it. She wasn't the loudest, she wasn't the most scandalous, but she was the most real. And in a world addicted to noise and novelty, that made her unforgettable. In the end, Barbara Hale wasn't just Della Street. She was proof that grace, strength, and loyalty could still thrive in Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight. She didn't just play a supporting role. She supported an entire generation of women who watched her and thought, I can be smart, I can be strong, I can be more. And maybe that's why, even today, her story matters more than ever. Because in a world of 5-second attention spans and fake fame, Barbara Hale reminds us that quiet power lasts longer than the loudest noise. She was the woman behind the legend, the heart behind the courtroom, and the soul behind a story Hollywood never fully deserved. He was my Perry, she once said, and I'll always be his Della. But to the rest of us, she'll always be something even more.